Erik, thank you for being here. Welcome to PubKey.
Thank you very much for having me.
First time?
It was my first time at PubKey.
What do you think?
I'm impressed. It's like fun to be in a space that like Bitcoin's like a normative thing that people are like, yeah, we know about Bitcoin. That's kind of the theme of the bar.
Yeah. Do you ever think about like $5 wrench attacks while you're here, like other Bitcoiners? I feel like Jameson Lopp is always uncomfortable here. He signed the wall though, so I think he likes it.
Not particular. Like one of my big theses about humanity is like people are actually really good and like have noble hearts for the most part. Like there's bad apples out there, but also like the $5 wrench attack thesis, I think is interesting because at the end of the day, like you can come at me, but like I'm definitely going to rip a couple of your eyes out if you want to do that. So
there's a lot of ego and insecurity built into that. Like I think that Bitcoin, people get a little bit of like a saved or a savior complex with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that level of self-importance, like if you have a couple of Bitcoin, you can still go to a bar. Like Michael Saylor goes to bars. Michael Novogratz goes to bars. It's fine.
Yeah.
They'll be fine.
Well, that's also like the story arc of how people get Bitcoin derangement syndrome too, is that like, I'm here to save Bitcoin. And
oh yeah,
as they go into that arc, you become Roger Ver or some other character who's like, without me, Bitcoin is going to die. And it's like, no, that's not true.
It's good if you have to get that really early. Like if you're new to Bitcoin, if you come from like private equity and it's like, I've seen this all before. I could fix this. I could change these things. But if you get it late after Bitcoin's made you obscenely wealthy, then that's where it gets to be super corrosive.
Yeah.
Like the humbling process has to hit early and often. All right. So we're going to have our meetup downstairs at 6:30. This is our pregame format. Give us a quick synopsis of what you want to talk about downstairs when folks get here.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much going to talk about my book, Cryptosovereignty. And really its whole synopsis is that like cryptography in itself has this new power of sovereignty that's found explicitly through the digital medium. And that's like a totally new form of the political power that we've never seen. And so when I say the political, it's important to differentiate that from politics, because politics is like who we elect, how we choose to have our forms of government, like all of the classic things of how we currently have the current paradigm of governance. The political is the bigger thing. It's like what the founding fathers did when they're like, hey, let's try this republic thing that's like never been done in human history before. And so to me, what Bitcoin and cryptography represents is this possibility for us to have a totally new opening for a new form of the political to come into existence. But that's only going to happen if people actually understand what the core praxis of like what cryptography and Bitcoin enables. And that's sort of the whole rabbit hole that we talk about with Bitcoin of understanding why having a fixed supply is so important, why the mining algorithm and its combination between computational energy and physical energy is so important. And ultimately the conclusion of knowing and understanding why the power of money is such an important thing that no one should ever have any power over it.
Yeah.
And sort of if we could give that to everybody in the world today and like have them sort of register it immediately, that would actually unveil a totally different paradigm of the political, where I actually think like we would essentially get a wild sort of anarcho-capitalist form of the world where, maybe we'd have like hundreds of thousands of different tiny nation states and city states that all sort of interact and use Bitcoin as their base layer to make the world operable.
Yeah. I think that Bitcoiners go a little bit far villainizing central bankers, because a lot of the things central bankers do tries to alleviate pain for other people, save their own lives, saves their own careers. Like if you go back to, I don't know, Rome, Spain, Great Britain, like all of the big examples that we talk about ad nauseum in Bitcoin. When elected officials or people that just have that power have this tool to alleviate pain or their own future pain, self-inflicted or otherwise, they're going to use that in the short term. And that's like a really addictive thing to have at their disposal. Like human nature is going to take over at that point. Bitcoin removing all of that just solves the problem to a certain extent. Maybe. I mean, it's an experiment still. But I feel like we veer too much into the Rothschilds and like globalist conspiracy when we talk about the central bankers are evil.
Yeah. And like, I think that's... First of all, like I think that's sort of an elitist position that Bitcoiners get to get, because like we finally have this tool that sort of slices the Gordian's knot to its base.
Sure.
Whereas like that's unavailable before. And so like while all of these other solutions weren't ideal or perfect, like it was the best that they had.
Yeah.
And so like, for example, like the Keynesian economic approach of that, like the government can print out money and encourage the development of certain industries for good. I do very much believe that like that was a sincere approach. But I think there was also an abandonment of true Austrian economic principles and praxeology of really forgetting and understanding the Cantillon effect, and that like people who are closest to the money spigot will ultimately benefit the most. And then that paired with the particular development that we've seen in the world of this sort of nihilistic viewpoint that most people now are just, hey, like I'm going to get as rich as I can, take care of myself and my family as best as I can, and kind of fuck the rest of the world. Like these two things paired together has created for a very particular worldview that I think since 2008 has really spelled for ultimately this nihilistic worldview to take effect. And in the response of that, I think that a lot of Bitcoiners, not only did they come to Bitcoin because they have that worldview and Bitcoin sort of rescues them from that,
Yeah.
but they continue to cling to that just because it's a relatively simplistic way of seeing the world that it does ultimately work at its base. And so it's very similar to like the Jewspiracy that there is, that like the Jews have taken over the world and that they're controlling it. Yeah, exactly. And like, while there are some particular truisms within that, like the lumping of it all together as like one single thing, it's just not operable at its base.
Yeah, the GCF was a big, I would say, marketing component to making the world like ready, or at least some crazies, ready to receive the concept of Bitcoin. But must have been in development for much longer than that, right? Bitcoin didn't just come on the scene as a response to the GFC. Where do you think a lot of these things started to collapse? Is it 71? Was it sort of in the middle? Where did that nihilism come from?
I mean, it was a long-standing thing. And like, this is really what Nietzsche presented, like in The Gay Science, where he declared the death of God, is that like, this was sort of a developmental path that we got really ultimately with sort of the scientific method and the development of the world, of that, like it started to rob this idea of sort of the mystery of God and the capacity of how the world operated in these mysterious ways. And in addition to that, because he wrote the Gay Science, I think it was like 1888, something like that. Yeah. So it's like the developmental path after that. I think there was a couple of key points of, like, first we have the American Civil War with issuing of greenbacks by the Union that ultimately saved the Union during the Civil War. And that was sort of the first iteration of fiat money. Then in 1907 and 1913, how we had the development of the Federal Reserve, 1917 with the Taxation Act, and then ultimately in 1933 with Executive Order 6102. Like all of these things were sort of the slow slipping that developed this sort of worldview of that money can ultimately be corrupted, that gold, as great as it is as an asset, it can be physically seized. And then by the time we got to 1971 with Nixon and the ending of the gold standard in total, there was sort of this like, well, we'll just let the dollar free float. The U.S. government will kind of sponsor and back everything. We'll tether this to oil at this point, which is the largest global commodity. And I think from that point forward, this nihilism sort of started to eat away at society, in that the way that inflation slowly infected into everything. And that then pairing with essentially also with FDR creating the 30-year mortgage, which now Trump has kicked down the road with the 50-year mortgage.
What could go wrong? It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a beautiful mortgage.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong with this?
Yeah. That's where I was going with it. You also have a generational component, right?
Absolutely.
Like a social component where... how do I want to frame this? The people that are hardest to reach with Bitcoin being a paradigm shift and something interesting that they should be paying attention to are folks where their career and their path through life has been successful, right? If you're a really wealthy, Warren Buffett, right? Mm-hmm. What was his buddy that died?
Munger.
Yeah, Charlie Munger. There we go. Rest in peace. The rat poison guys. For them, I can have some empathy that it's really difficult for them to look at this crazy new thing that completely undermines their financial models, their approach to an extraordinarily successful career. And that nihilism grew, and I think the GFC is a really good marker to put in because that's right around the beginning of Bitcoin. But that grew over the course of a couple of generations. I think Gen X was the first one to start getting really disassociated and disaffected and nihilistic because it worked for the boomers. The 30-year mortgage was fantastic. Like they thought that they worked really hard and that they were right about everything and didn't quite understand the macro backdrop. But that transition and all these things that happened in previous decades, culminating with a complete collapse, is kind of what we're in the middle of. So Bitcoin comes at a good time if you can survive it, I suppose.
Yeah, well, and one of the tragedies that I see right now is that, particularly with Gen X and beyond being so disaffected, they don't understand the core thesis of Bitcoin, sort of the cryptography that's baked in and the ability to be able to essentially flee with it. Because like, what I really see happening in the next 5 to 10 years is that we've now gotten to an extremist place that like the political paradigm or politics as we see it today, like it's no longer about right left, but it's about a form of enmity between each other, of that we're not going to find agreement. We're not going to find commonality or middle ground. And it's really a winner take all game. And as that development happens, like I see a powerful youth socialist movement coming up that's going to be like, look, why shouldn't we just kill the boomers and take their shit?
Yeah.
Like they haven't given us an opportunity. They don't want us to have Social Security. They don't want us to be able to provide for our families. They don't want to give us breaks on our mortgages.
Sounds Maoist.
Yeah. So why shouldn't, in a Maoist theology, and like this is really important because Mao in his four philosophies, like the first philosophy he points out is like, you need to be comfortable with killing men that are your enemies. Yeah. And that's sort of what's going on, is that there's a very easy argument to make that the boomers are your enemies. They've taken housing away from you and your ability to have a family and be secure and get a wage at a fair wage. So why shouldn't we kill them and take their shit?
Right.
I think we also, anybody who's studied history knows and understands the communist and socialist paradigm and where this ends up. But I think for particularly with this generation that's not very well read in those things, it's a very appealing cause. And then very much in the correction of that, like fascism developed explicitly as an anti-communist ideology. Mm-hmm. And I think that America's very ripe for a strong fascist leader to rise up and say, hey, give me the power. I'll take care of the socialists and the communists, put them in prison camps, and I'll make sure that you can keep your home, that we'll implement social welfare programs that'll work best for Americans first. Let's get all of these other people out of here. Let's make sure that we put America first. And I think both these solutions are quite bad, you know, and like
so it was a break point in Europe and lots of other places. It was an either or. It was either going to break socialist or fascist in a lot of those places.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand what Weimar Germany was the experiment to try to bring these two people together.
Yeah,
who fundamentally have enmity at their very basis because they have a different philosophical viewpoint of how the world should operate.
Yeah,
and it's really important to understand that part of the Marxist paradigm is that because in scientific socialism, man has decided the rules according to how they will organize, that means that if there are people that are too wealthy, you can simply steal from them and kill them. You know, whereas the fascist paradigm is more about, yes, but let's make sure that we put Germans first or Italians first. And that's literally the difference between
kill rich foreigners first.
Yeah. And it's literally the difference between national socialism versus international socialism. Yeah. They're both variants of socialism. Yeah. It's just about which flavor do you choose.
Both bad. Both amoralistic and really just a poisonous pathway to go down.
Well, and it's interesting that Bitcoin is this very intriguing middle road that says, no, we put the individual unilaterally in first with the sort of quote unquote rights that cryptography impels. Yeah. You know, like if you have your private key secured, yeah, maybe somebody can torture you, but if you have it in something like multisig, they got to torture you and then get to your different geolocations to gather up all the different parts of those keys. Sure. And that affords for something very different to be a possibility.
Yeah. That's why I just hold Ethereum. So there's a lot of different ways that we could take this. I love this conversation because, you know, this is like the social political side. That technical and economic are super fascinating. And I spent most of my Bitcoin career in that, but I'm really fascinated in the social political side. In the US, every country is kind of different in their approach. Even between New York and San Francisco, I guess like cultural elements expressed in the Bitcoin community are going to focus on different things. Mm-hmm. In New York, obviously the financial system and, you know, the treasury companies and ETFs, that takes over a certain amount of the conversation. We still have bit devs and chain code and all that stuff, which is great. And individuals that really care about that stuff. But in recent years, I'm curious if you feel this as well, a deprioritization of holding your own keys, being self-sovereign, and using Bitcoin for, its full potential of what it could achieve for an individual, and placing it back in the hands of an institution so that number goes up. It's the rich and depressed thing that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Where's your concern here? Bitcoin works best in the hands of individuals, but most individuals are dumb and don't want that responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, look, the treasury company approach and giving other people their keys, it's a beautiful siren's call. Like, here's this beautiful woman. She's like, hey, come hang out at my island. We'll just fuck the whole time. We got all my hot friends. We'll bang it out the whole time.
Take my Bitcoin.
Yeah. Little do you know that by you making that choice, you're going to stay there, fuck her for a few days. And you finally realize, like, oh shit, there's been 2 decades that have suddenly passed by. Most of my life has passed me by. And while I've lived it in luxury, the world has simply sailed by. And I also think that the component that we just talked about with the different socialist ideologies that are playing out is that, like, in that siren's call, you give your Bitcoin over, it turns out that ends your life, because when you finally have your 6102 moment and it's like, hey, if you make more than $1 million in the United States, we're going to tax your unrealized capital gains. And so if you're holding your multiple Bitcoin at Coinbase, yeah, we're just seizing them. You can have this USD in turn. Oh, that happens to be inflating at 50% per year now. But hey, we gave you back the nominal amount that you were given. And I think that this is ultimately where we wind up. And I think this is ultimately why people holding Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way is really important, because we're ultimately going to see a reorganization where all nation states are going to come to have their own private Bitcoin treasuries because they realize that's the most valuable asset there is. They're going to do taxation in Bitcoin, very much like how in the United States we used to do taxes either in gold or in silver. And as we sort of watch this reorganization of the global monetary standard to a Bitcoin standard, maybe there's some gold or silver mixed into it. Like, I'm not opposed to that. And I think that there's particular value to that as well. People are going to realize that the reason that Bitcoin is so powerful is this self-sovereign thing. If you don't have the ability to control your Bitcoin, you might as well use gold or treasuries or anything else, because you're literally just doing the same thing with extra steps. So
but the number goes up.
Well, the number will go up. But the problem is that in that world, when you have a $10 million Bitcoin, the problem is that a gallon of milk costs $200 and that a carton of egg is $75.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, you might have one on a nominal scale, but like,
yeah.
And I talk about this a bit in my book too. Like, this is sort of the Trojan horse strategy that Bitcoin has, where, and I find it really interesting that this is going on right now. Like, it's not clear, are the crypto anarchists in Bitcoin fucking over the Bitcoin treasury guys by partnering with the government, or is the government fucking over the crypto anarchist guys by being able to compromise Bitcoin in this way?
How are the crypto anarchists partnering with the government? Just explain that for me.
Essentially, well, it's interesting. They do it through a capitalist mode, where essentially they go to the capitalists and go, hey, we have this Bitcoin thing. It's great. Governments can't control it. There's no way for you to be able to inflate it. Why don't you guys add all of this to your
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Why don't you guys add all of this to your balance sheets? We watch number go up.
The reserve, strategic reserves.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
We watch number go up. What eventually happens is the government's turn seize all of those assets. Sure. And the real question is that, like,
they already did. They're just using the ones that are stolen, seized in the first place.
Well, exactly. And so now the question is that can Bitcoin still exist and interact with the world as a truly uncensorable currency that is global, mobile, and for all people everywhere? Or does this just become a high-powered banker's tool that's used for number go up infinitely?
Yeah.
And I think that open-ended question is really important. And that really comes down to Bitcoiners to determine how they're going to interact with Bitcoin to empower themselves. And this is sort of where the true political of Bitcoin, where the rubber hits the road, is like, do we educate people to be self-sovereign with their Bitcoin, to know and understand the value of it, of these sort of tertiary systems like Lightning and eCash? Or do people get encouraged to put it into ETFs and treasury holding companies and other things?
Yeah.
And I think that open-ended question in itself is the true quest of Bitcoin, and is ultimately sort of what my book is about, is will people find self-sovereignty through cryptography, or will they default into the ultimate sort of way that different companies can have custodial ownership over their Bitcoin, which ultimately sort of cucks the whole thing?
Yeah. But, when you think about the privacy sets, if these crypto anarchists that you talk about, the folks that sort of stay off grid, there are other things that are sort of choke points, right? When you think about surveillance tech, Palantir, visibility into early Coinbase, early Circle purchases within the US, elsewhere. There are ways to obfuscate that, like people that know the technology, maybe have already done that, maybe not. Maybe they're sitting on a cache of Bitcoin in a hardware wallet that just came from Coinbase. But, that information is ultimately like knowable. And the flow of funds are also knowable as well, which leads me to think that the subset of crypto anarchists that are able to, roll their own stack off grid becomes a very small set of individuals, right? And historically, a very wealthy small cohort doesn't fare so well.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that on a go forward basis? If we do see, it's not going to be like a 6102, in my opinion. It's going to be, hey, strategy, hey, treasury companies, hey, ETFs. You're going to play by different rules and different tax structures and just go along with it because everything's at Coinbase for everybody anyway. What do you think that world looks like for the self-sovereign crypto anarchist?
Yeah, I think this ultimately comes down to it's sort of different strategies and tactics. And so, I don't think there's anything wrong with the approach that has been taken by different lobbying firms that have gone into DC and been like, hey, let's try to treat Bitcoin differently. Let's try to get different tax treatments and other things. I think that there's total merit to that. I personally don't agree with it. I'm more interested in individuals that are trying to create new sorts of privacy techs, to create different and easier methodologies to be able to not only obfuscate funds, but to be able to use cryptography to empower people in different ways. And this goes way past Bitcoin. And this is part of what my current project, Vora, is working on, is I think AI is an extremely powerful tool. I think we're in the 1994 of where AI is worth what the internet was. Everyone will be using it eventually. And we're in a super dangerous phase right now where all of it's highly proprietary. If you get subpoenaed for really any reason and you're using something like Grok or OpenAI or Anthropic, that information will just be handed over to the government.
Sure.
In addition to the way that it manipulates language in a very particular way to essentially start making you kind of forget how to think, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And this is really, really dangerous for a number of reasons. And so at Vora, we're essentially trying to create a self-fiduciary AI where you own all of the weights, measures, the way that you program it, the way that it evolves over time, and the way that you feed it really deep and personal information. And so making sure that that is totally self-custodied, that only you can recover it, that nobody can actually see into that information.
So you run your own server.
Yeah, that's what it is. You run your own server, and eventually you'll interact with the whole of the internet through this server. We think that that's the direction of the future. In addition to this is going to handle your Bitcoin. It's going to do all of your mixing for you. It's going to interact with other networks in order to be able to obfuscate funds even more.
Yeah.
This will become a very powerful and core tool that people will need to be able to do that. But it's still an open-ended question about how that works ultimately.
I think it's awesome. I would love it. But as somebody that's tried to, run their own home server and everything, I'm a former lawyer, but semi-competent on some tech items. I can go through FAQs and, tutorials and everything. But how realistic is it for a lot of people? Do you think that they're forced into it because it's more of a survival mechanism? Everything gets so bad and the surveillance state is so overbearing that a huge cohort of people are forced into figuring out how to run their own stack. Coupled with a generational component. So boomers and Gen X, okay. I think that millennials were in a sweet spot. We were the last generation, native internet, but also worked with pretty clunky internet and clunky machines. So we dug into it way harder than Gen Z is. Gen Z is the app generation, effectively. Yeah. So I think, millennials are either going to save the world or just sort of be bystanders as it collapses with a lot of these things with Bitcoin and your own servers. But What do you think is going to be the impetus? Because not that many people are running their own servers today, even with Bitcoin, running their own node. Like most people are entrusting, hardware wallets or custodial solution just because they don't want that responsibility.
Yeah, and this is one of the approaches that we're taking, is that we think UX on a whole just needs a totally new overhaul, and there needs to be a completely different way to approach it. So one of the ways that we want to deploy these servers is that this is going to be a true kind of Apple approach of plug and play, that you literally put down your box, you plug it in. There's going to be a workflow that's very simplistic, open and fluid, that's going to teach you about how to do the full setup, and it's going to be as easy as possible, because we think that trying to make that sort of intuitive Apple approach is going to be key component to how it does. And the other is that we can lean a lot more on AI with this stuff too, and that the way that it can do A/B split testing, that it can feed back into itself and tell us what is working and isn't working, we think is a very powerful component and approach. In addition to we think as people become more and more intimate with their AI, they're eventually going to realize that this data is just as valuable as their Bitcoin. And this is sort of where our thesis lines up with Bitcoin, is ultimately the data that you're plugging into your AI will be just as valuable as your Bitcoin, because these things are actually going to be inseparable at the end of the day, because you're going to ask your AI to do stuff like, hey, I need some new, I need grocery shopping for the week. Go out and buy the stuff that we need for groceries. And furthermore, it's going to be smart enough to know, I'm going to look for sales and discounts and other things. I'm going to look at how much cash flow you have. Oh, and I'm going to give you a report. It turns out that you had a larger electricity bill than you thought because you had been mining extra Bitcoin, which while that's good, cash flow based upon what the price is we think you should probably save 90% of your Bitcoin this month as opposed to selling. But we think that with how powerful of a tool this is, that it's really going to feed back into itself, and that a different approach both to UX is going to be very important, and just making it easy and simple as possible, because we very much see AI right now as Steve Jobs saw the personal computer in 1975, when he approached people and was like, hey, we want for this personal computer to be something that everyone owns and has in their home. People were like, you're fucking crazy. There's such sophisticated technology. Who would ever need a personal computer at home? Yeah. Yet lo and behold, by the year 2000, most people actually had that. And this is one of the other things I found really interesting from being involved in Bitcoin, is that I think most people are very wrong about their worldview. Most people seem to think that a worldview that's almost static, that carries forward, is the way that the world works. And I just don't believe that. And the only reason that I have enough confidence about this is that, I've been watching Bitcoin since 2012. And I remember the very idea that Bitcoin would eventually be something that presidents would talk about, or that we would have sovereign nations having their own treasury, was such a far-flung and ridiculous idea at the time that even people working in the technology said it was ridiculous and impossible. But I think that that's part of our jobs as individuals in the world, is to insist that there can be a different world than the one that we have. And to be honest, the current world that we've been given, it's a highly nihilistic and abusive one. The very idea that a company like Palantir should be allowed to surveil us endlessly and infinitely is horrific. The very idea that we're sacrificing the amount of privacy and self-sovereignty to forms of government and bureaucracy that frankly hate us, I think is a very despicable one. And I would rather insist on there being a different world where we have privacy and the ability to self-selectively reveal information according to what we believe is correct. It is a world that I'm willing to fight for. And that's part of what we're trying to build at Vora, is it's not about, and one, we do think that this will be a hugely valuable company, but this is much more about an ethical approach of that. Don't people have a true right to privacy and the self-sovereignty of what Bitcoin promises, rather than this other approach of that maybe we get number go up. But even if Bitcoin was at $10 million a coin today, I think most Bitcoiners, even as rich as they were with their yachts and Lambos or other pedantic bullshit like that, I think that we would very much feel that we were defeated, because there isn't the real ability for us to really raise up the global south and make this for something that can allow for a greater global order that is fair and really gives a future to our children and other people.
Yeah. Look, I agree. That was the hope and optimism that Bitcoin gave me. It's not easy, and it's not easy to fight for so long. To go from retard to right in the last 10 years has been an experience, and it is worth fighting for. But it doesn't end with Bitcoin. It ends with the privacy elements. And if AI is going to look at my electricity bill and how much money I made on I was going to say something else, but I'll say TikTok, and then recommend I have cricket protein, then, we are moving in the wrong direction. All these things can be co-opted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that we need to be so thoughtful about how we approach these things in the future. And that's really our hope with Vora by having a self-fiduciary AI is it's loyal to you and you first and foremost. So while using a proprietary open AI model that says, hey, we really recommend that you have some cricket protein in your body, I'll be like, hey,
take that out.
Yeah, my personal Vora AI, can you look at this? And it's oh yeah, they're totally trying to cuck you right now because it happens to be that OpenAI has a relationship with cricket protein, and they've been augmenting all of the language. So these words intransigent, you don't know anymore. And at the end of 1984, it's really interesting that George Orwell, he has an appendix that's specifically about the language that he developed in 1984 called ingsoc.
Yeah.
And in that, he tries to point out that the important thing when ingsoc wasn't that they were just trying to give new vernacular, but they were trying to actually make people forget certain words and language, so that thoughts of distance actually became totally impossible. And it's pretty interesting now, if you ask some pretty edgy questions to OpenAI or Grok, you'll find the way that not only it limits it, but it tries to give you different words and language to get you to think about the problem.
Not even that edgy. Well,
yeah, it's actually totally true.
It depends on the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a 4 on the edginess scale, but that goes to show how limited
anarchists talking about what is and it's not edgy is not going to be mainstream. I understand.
Yeah, and so we're at a very important point where it's clear that Bitcoin's an extremely powerful tool. It's clear that AI is an extremely powerful tool. And we do have an ability to use these to actually ensure a greater degree of freedom for our children and for future generations that come after us. But we have to protect what's going on at its basis. And I think what we've seen in the decisions with things like the Samourai case, it's extremely alarming.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, and with that being said, it's really important to understand we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is for a very important reason.
Yeah.
He used perfect forward secrecy as a tactic of cryptography to protect himself. And I have a great chapter in my book called Theory of the Crypto Partisan, where it's based off of a Schmittian idea that the partisan, these individuals who can kind of obfuscate their identity between civilian and military element, and it's impossible to tell the difference between the two. They're the key element in the forces that are battling evil in the world and that are able to make war on a different topological front. And it's specifically the way that they can not have an identity that can be located physically in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think people, for example, the individual that came up with UASF, Shaolin Fry, his identity isn't openly known in the world. And he took that approach for a very important reason. And it's because once you put your identity out there, unfortunately Kenon did, you now become a very real target.
Yeah.
And I think that the sad and chilling statement is that if you are a developer that wants to be doing cool and new things that are advancing privacy tech, use perfect forward secrecy and the ability that cryptography has to protect your identity first and foremost.
Yep.
And
you give up a lot of future rights by doing so, though. Right?
Absolutely.
You have to be a little bit more philanthropic in your intent to actually deliver these things. So when did we record with Corva and David Morris? Last week? Was that last Thursday?
Yeah, I saw some of the stuff that you guys did with them.
Yeah, so this came up, and I think it was David Z. Morris, because they were both covering the trial. They were both there for the sentencing. And I think it was David that said, developers either need to take Satoshi's route or not do it at all, because the target on their back, whether it be from governments or another government or, somebody that doesn't like that thing that you put out into the world, particularly if you're benefiting from it financially. And there might be ways to do that now, but Tornado Cash was taking fees for using their mixing contract. Samourai had a fee element to it as well for certain products and services. Bitcoin. What was it? Bitcoin fog, BTC fog.
Oh yeah.
That's another Roman that is caught up in this DOJ conquest against privacy tech. There was a fee element to that as well. Following you have to be comfortable spending so much time developing something that you're literally giving away.
Yeah.
Which is not the best mechanism to incentivize innovation, but I don't know. How do you square that, paradox?
Yeah, I think the ultimate truth is that like these are going to be relatively philanthropic endeavors, and I think with that being said, there's a particular form of glory that goes with that. Like Satoshi Nakamoto's name is remembered because of what he did. It's not the fact that Satoshi isn't out buying his Ferraris and Lambos right now. Like
he could have had other wallets.
He could have, but the truth is that
could be Peter Todd.
Watch the HBO documentary if you think that.
I did. We had that guy here, actually. It was hysterical.
And
Colin
it's really important to understand that there are certain things that are more important than just money in the world. And with that being said, I think there's very interesting and innovative approaches that neither of us can actually predict, that people can create methodologies, not only to be able to mix and source these funds in particular ways that could be of benefit to them, but that through them having a self-feedbacking mechanism and sort of developing whatever ecosystem they choose, they can actually make this much bigger and more important than ever before. And again, this is one of the reasons we're developing Vora, is because answering these questions around privacy tech, I think, is the most important thing to humanity right now. And that's going to be true carrying forward. And so individuals who solve this problem, frankly, it's a glorious thing that I think centuries from now, people will be like, oh yeah, at the dawn of AI, these guys developed this thing that made sure that people could actually still have privacy, that they could still actually think in ways that were forbidden otherwise. And that's one of the real dangers, is that we're going into a total panopticon where all thoughts, all locations, all measurement, everything about us wants to be monitored. And it's under this guise of safety and security.
Yeah. But do you want this wrapped in terrorism or child safety? Yeah.
And to be very clear, they want to be good masters, but they want to be masters first and foremost.
Yeah.
And that's extremely alarming.
That's even being generous. I don't know that they want to be good masters. I think they want to just be masters.
Yeah.
Not to play too much devil's advocate, how achievable is this, especially when you look at the hardware, the chips, potential backdoors, the infrastructure? What is the bright spot? Because I can tell you're very optimistic and you love humans, and we want to move forward to a better place. The dark place that my mind goes to is I just assume this thing's recording me every single moment of every single day.
Yeah, as you should, particularly mobile devices. There's not a lot of optimistic stuff about mobile devices now.
Right.
We do have certain things like FPGAs, which are functional programmable gate array chips, which essentially each chip you can reorganize how the gate arrays operate so that it can be truly randomized down to the hardware level. Because to be clear, part of how we started Vora was essentially at the beginning of the year, me and my best friend, we went down to El Salvador and we just hung out for a week on vacation, really talking about is Bitcoin self-custody? Is it a real thing, or is this all just a complete fucking LARP? And really at the end of it, we got to this is a LARP. Chips can be backdoored, phones can be backdoored.
Sure.
It's all very problematic.
Well, there was some of that with Ledger. I think that cold card Trezor beat that back a fair amount, at least from their processes. Foundation devices, that was the entire premise of Foundation devices in the passport.
And I love their approach.
I do too.
There are still certain places in the hardware that I have critiques of Foundation. Same thing with devices like Start9, but this is the exact path that we need to go.
Yeah.
And I also
it's unachievable right now. The way consumer electronics work, it's not a viable pathway for a company to also then catch up with everybody else on UI UX and as trusted brands for as long as they've been. It's a gargantuan task. I think Zach and team are doing a great job. No shade at them, and Start9 as well. Is it even achievable though?
And this is the place that I insist, yes, it is. But The only way it's achievable is by it's something that we insist around. It's something that a brand is built around, and it's something that needs to constantly be as a point of view of how development goes. Because ultimately, unless we get chip fabrication happening here in America, owned under our own pretenses and designed with explicit functions that are going to have the chips developed in this way, it's ultimately going to be unachievable. And it's not just the chips, but it's also going to be all of the other components that go into building a full stand-up computer. And like, again, this is a massive undertaking of task. But the simple fact that we have American military hardware that is running Chinese chips right now is fucking insane.
That sounds xenophobic. You don't like Taiwan?
No, I don't like fucking Taiwan because it's very clear that there's problems that are going on. And like I don't know, this is one of the places that I feel very angry at the political establishment is that like,
I'm kidding, by the way.
I know you are, but it's that like
I didn't mean to needle you so hard.
Well, like the fact that like our country has sold us up to the river through our political establishment that's clearly corrupt, you know, and like I've talked about this on another podcast. Like, I want to see a states' rights movement get developed where states like essentially collaborate on their sovereignty to find all federal representatives guilty of treason and put them on fucking trial for this shit. Yeah. Because the fact that we are using Chinese-based chips and American military hardware that can get backdoored at the moment that we go into a hot war with the Chinese, that's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, well, we still have the floppy disks for the nukes. That's cool.
Thank fucking God. That's where we need to be.
I heard those still work.
Well, it's just the fact of that, like, we're a highly... That Silicon...
It'll be like Battlestar Galactica, where every modernized ship goes down, and the old one is the only one that survives.
Pretty much, you know. And like it's kind of terrifying that somehow, as the most wealthy and developed nation in the world, that we have allowed for shit to get this fucked up and to have ourselves become this backwards. I mean, like. The fact that Nancy Pelosi has made the amount of money that she has as being a political figure and that people haven't openly been asking for her to be put on trial for treason is fucking insanity to me.
I did an interview earlier today, and they really wanted to drill into the fact that Trump came here one time. So I was there by the spokesperson, and I was the expert on Trump.
Well, you're a piece of shit Nazi for doing that. Like, how fucking dare you?
Thank you. I invited
hang on,
everybody.
before we get any further, do you want an opportunity to accuse yourself about the fact that you were in the same room as him? Because if you don't, you're obviously a white nationalist piece of shit that hates America.
I thought it was really funny, and it was very kind, and he was generous with his time. We invited everybody.
How dare you say those things about Trump?
We've invited worse people. I forgot where I was going with this.
Well, sorry, I wanted to go into my diatribe of that. Like, this is part of the absolute idiocy that has reduced itself down to American politics. Is that instead of us being able to have disagreeable positions and realize that we're both Americans,
Tucker should disavow.
Well, yeah, and like. I'm absolutely fucking outraged at this point of that. Now I'm at the place where it's like, look, anybody who is trying to play this fucking bullshit game of saying that, like, because you talk to Trump or because you talk to whoever fucking else on the left, that like you're somehow compromised, like you're the problem.
Yeah. So this is what I meant to say. During the interview, I was somehow an expert on Trump coin. I don't follow Trump coin or World Liberty. I couldn't tell you the first thing about it. Like, the kids are doing this thing. They made a lot of money. That happened in crypto a long time. It's another story. I assume there's nothing illegal. Nobody's getting hurt. If they do, they should get punished. Like, I don't fucking know.
No. And like, I see where you're going is that like, well, this is the guilty by association bullshit that I think is insane. Is that like half of the country needs to realize that Trump was legitimately elected as the president of the United States.
No, it was fraud.
Yeah, thank you. But the other one before was not
all
fraud.
Those groypers.
Oh. Well, and it's just like, at what point do we say enough is a fucking enough?
Yeah.
Like, America's a real place with hundreds of millions of people that deserve to have their political rights recognized and honored in a meaningful way. And we have a corrupt federal establishment that allows for all federal representatives to engage in insider trading that has allowed for them to sell the American public upriver.
Yeah, that's where I was going. It doesn't make me comfortable if they're in a position to make crypto regulations to their benefit. That pales in comparison to what Nancy Pelosi and a lot of other members of Congress have done with insider information for decades.
Yeah.
Right? All of it's gross, and none of it should happen. There should be a conflict of interest, and they shouldn't touch any of this shit. But when they're putting the chips into the American military, I think the stakes are much higher. But I'm sure Nancy will be passed away for many years by the time that's a problem. It'll be somebody else's problem.
Well, and the fact that like I think the average age of a U.S. representative is like over 60, maybe even over 70 at this point in time. Like that's fucking
Ages too now.
Yeah, I'm absolutely ageist. Like, how fucking dare you make me pay into Social Security when I know it won't be there?
Do you know how terrified
but your
you would
generation
be
gets to take, you get to just steal openly from me?
How terrified would you be if Nancy Pelosi picked you up in an Uber? I wouldn't take the Uber.
I would absolutely take the Uber.
No, at that age? I'm just talking about the age at that point.
I mean, look, if you want to leave me alone in an Uber with Nancy Pelosi for some distance of time, like...
Well, what are you going to do? Talk about your book?
Yeah, definitely. And but by the end, me and Nancy are going to be best friends. And this is sort of the crisis that we're moving towards, is at some point, the people in this country that are under 40 are going to realize that, like, your parents' generation sold you out, and they did it for them to get lower interest rates, for them to get free Social Security, and for them to get better healthcare than you will ever have access to.
Yeah.
And not only should you be outraged, but you should be organizing in a meaningful way that's actually going to do something about it.
Yeah.
But until people actually achieve the courage to do that and realize that the Republicans nor the Democrats neither have any plausible solution, and both are fundamentally guilty of the same problem.
Yeah.
And until we find that third way between the two, there's no possible answer. And something I've promoted on other podcasts is the idea of using essentially states to ram through Article 5 ratifications to the Constitution, which is where through state legislatures you ratify the Constitution directly, to essentially organize politically in a lateral direction using a totally new and different strategy to essentially overcome the federal government with coalitions of states. Like, I think that's the only viable solution at this point in time, in addition to, like, that means that we're no longer relying on political parties to get things done, but we're simply relying on trying to get things ratified through state legislatures alone with nothing to do with the federal government. And ultimately, this probably creates for a constitutional crisis, because there's no fucking way the feds would be like, oh, yeah, an Article 5 amendment to the Constitution that robs us of all power. We love this. This is great.
No, but nobody knows this shit. I didn't know this shit until I applied for a liquor license for PubKey. In terms of like borough, like assembly members, borough president, like county officials, state officials, like the further you get away from president, like maybe people know their senators, maybe representative. Beyond that, district attorney, judges, nobody knows who any of these people are. Yep. So effectuating that as a grassroots thing is going to be, I think, difficult. But I do agree with you with all of this stuff. I think that Zoomers are really pissed off. They took away their YouTube guy. And I think people are fundamentally misunderstanding sort of Fuentes and Groypers and why they're so pissed off and why they're being such a thorn, particularly on the conservative side, on the Republican side. I don't see that dissipating anytime soon. I think that people need to be a little bit more understanding of where it's coming from and not what it's saying, and like, you know, bad words being thrown around. Like the anger, I think, for younger generations, particularly American males, is, you know, becoming palpable. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and that
young
can either
American
be a very
males,
good thing
like,
or a very bad thing. Like, you know,
I find it very interesting about, I feel really bad for young American males. Like, you're the pieces of shit. You're the problems to everything. You don't deserve fair education. You don't deserve fair rights. Anybody abuses or takes advantage of you, it's your own fault. You guys hate women. You guys hate minorities. And you don't deserve to have equality because all the generations before you somehow robbed everybody else. So you're to be punished for it. Yeah. Like these are the very elements that in Weimar Germany in the 1920s created for the very
socialism
exact
or fascism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, it's very scary to me how for some reason we seem to be so thoughtless about understanding history. And I mean, like, maybe that's just a general affect of the thoughtlessness of society in general, but like, within the next 5 to 10 years, like this Groyper contingency of young white males that seem to be leaning right, they're going to become the most powerful political force that has existed in the 21st century.
I agree.
And they're fucking outraged.
I agree.
And so like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you really think that they're going to lean into a political party that's saying you should hate yourself, you shouldn't celebrate your heritage, that you don't deserve to have everything, that you should pay for the elderly when you won't get a fair payout? Oh, and if you want to have a family or children, not only are you a fascist and piece of shit, but you shouldn't have these things because it's inherently unfair. Like these people are going to organize
Please fill out this paperwork for your 50-year mortgage.
Yeah, like these people are going to organize on one or two extremes. While I think the communist extreme is a very real possibility, like
it's attractive to a certain cohort. I don't think it. I don't know. I see it veering in both directions. I hope that libertarian, anarchist values expressed largely through Bitcoiners. I think Bitcoiners do need to take a little bit more control over this because it won't be fun for us if it splits the way Weimar Germany did.
Yeah, and like this has actually been an ongoing conversation I've had on a number of podcasts, is that like, frankly, we need an orange party. We need to start organizing ourselves. And it's not because any of us want this or want any positions of power, but it's because if we don't do this, we either get hardcore fascism. That's going to be super bad. And they're definitely going to go after Bitcoiners and steal our money. Or we get hardcore communism. And they're definitely just going to kill all of us and take our Bitcoin. Yeah. So we need to have a radical orange party that's going to establish itself and say,
adjusting like this.
Thank you. I'm happy that you're announcing it. Because essentially, like, without having, and I'm calling it radical moderatism. And part of that idea is that everything that you're having on the extreme left, that's fucking insane. You need to say, fuck you. You people are insane. And when we finally get in power, we're going to put you federal representatives on trial. And the same thing on the far right. It's like, you people that want to incite hateful, bigoted dialogue, fuck you. You're not part of our establishment. And furthermore, for the corruption that you've represented in the federal party as Republicans, we're going to put you on trial for treason too. And I honestly think if we could get a radical moderate party like something like the Orange Party explicitly to assert its rights through state rights, I don't see why we couldn't pass through 35 state legislatures an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that says every single member of the federal government who has been elected will be put on trial for treason under their various states to see how they have profited off of selling the American public upriver. And I feel pretty confident that about 90% will be found guilty and hung, because it's very clear that the people that have put themselves into politics, while maybe they do have the best interests at heart of people, in the way that they have made their money for themselves, it has been through selling the American public upstream and making sure that our children don't have a viable future. And for that, I do think that they need to be put on trial for treason.
I agree. Across many industries, it's not just semiconductors. It's pharma. It's agriculture. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and unless we have a party that says we're establishing this independently, if you've been involved in politics before, you are not allowed in our party. And you should probably be fucking scared of us. And to be fair, we're going to do a truth and reconciliation trial before we do all of this stuff. So if you come forward and confess your crimes, we won't hold you guilty and hang you. You'll never be able to participate in politics again, and you'll probably be ostracized in your communities, but you'll cling to your life.
Yeah.
But when we put you on trial and you haven't confessed for those crimes and they come out, you will be hung. It will be done publicly. And that's to make an explicit statement that the American government is subjected to the American people. That's what the Constitution is about. It is about an explicit document that limits the power of government. And we now have a federal government that has gotten out of control. And the only way that's viable at this point to do it is through the establishment. And I don't even want to call it a political party, but it's essentially a social movement.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is like,
it's very French.
Well, being American, like we get to talk about like this being an American centric thing, but like this is a global problem at this point in time that Europe is definitely having way more severe problems with.
Yeah.
And with that being said, like
it's the globalists.
Well, look, again, like this kind of falls into the same sort of Jewspiracy thing I said before, of that, like there's truth to the globalist thing, you know, and it's that like there's going to be greater solidarity between the corrupt business class billionaires in America as there are with the same ones in France.
Yep.
But this is just because they've developed,
more common.
Yeah, they've developed exclusive relationships with their government to corrupt them for their own benefits.
Yep.
You know, and so it's really important to see that. And very similar to the American Revolution, there's a reason that Thomas Jefferson wrote the majority of the rights of man, you know. know, it's because like these were truly global movements that understood, hey, all people everywhere deserve a right to the fruits of their labor, which again returns us to Bitcoin. Yeah. Like Bitcoin is truly a global movement because I get to have solidarity with the fact that like I know that people in South Africa, Japan, China, and Kyrgyzstan are all getting fucked in the same way that I am. It's just different volumes of how they're getting fucked. Yeah. I just happen to be part of the most privileged elite by being American, and that like I'm getting a little less fucked than people like say in South Africa or places like Botswana. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we're all part of the same establishment that has an elite class of corrupt political individuals who have partnered with a corrupt class of quote unquote business people to essentially exploit us.
All right. We got time for one more because you just made me think of, are you good for one more question?
Yeah, absolutely.
This might be a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Sure.
We started PubKey with the idea of all revolutions need pubs and taverns. And if you go back to, let's say, pre-revolution, Thomas Paine, Common Sense, the pamphlets, that was the dissemination of information.
Yep.
The pamphlets on the bar, somebody reads it, thinks about it, asks somebody else, is it me or does shit suck? Somebody else says shit sucks out there, let's go overthrow the government. Done. So in the 70s, right, before the 70s, you had local radio, local newspaper, local television shows. You had, there are a couple of books written about this, about like the like death of 50,000 voices across the United States around these private equity roll-ups that started in the 80s, consolidation to the networks that we know today, which are completely homogenous, right? Like there's really no functional difference between MSNBC and Fox at this point, Fox News. Might look a little bit, but it's really just my football team versus yours, which is, I think,
but
what you
we're
were
definitely
getting at
both
before.
still playing football.
It's still playing football. I agree. Same with radio, same with newspapers. Like you lose the local touch, and you also lose it just in basic culture. It's Marvel movies and, you know, slot bowls. Yeah. Like the death of family-owned taverns, family-owned restaurants, expressing, you know, a local cultural difference here and there. When we think about these ideas that we were just talking about, like, you know, moving into the modern era, clearly Charlie Kirk was incredibly effective. Fuentes is on the come up. You know, Tucker Candace, Megyn Kelly. But the cat's kind of out of the bag. It's almost like trying to recreate Bitcoin in a way where the efficacy of Charlie Kirk is going to be 10,000 times harder than what Charlie built because that playbook's already been run. So you have a dilution, and a lot of people are trying to fill the void after his passing, after his murder. You also have people very well aware of what it could become if somebody's really effective. And that's why I think people are so nervous about Fuentes being
Well, that's also why Charlie Kirk was killed publicly and openly in the way that he was.
Yeah, exactly. So when we think about things that are pretty transformative, like a Orange Party or a grassroots campaign, a cultural movement like you were just talking about, what are the distribution channels to actually reach people and get to that consensus or that critical mass that you need?
Well, I think social media on a whole is an extremely powerful tool. And like, that's how people like Fuentes or Charlie Kirk even established a base. But we also know that like, that's a highly augmented and corrupted tool such as Instagram. So I know that PubKey's on IM2 is Nostr. Like I think that this unequivocally...
You do Nostr? I do Nostr.
I say no. Like this is an infinite debate that we can go into.
What's HODL for you?
HODL.
HODL? I do HODL.
Okay.
I hate HODL.
That I agree. You know. So do you say pleb or plebe?
Pleb.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but for plebeian.
Plebeian.
But so like one of the things I think is so interesting about Nostr is because it's a truly uncensorable technology. Like I don't think we've ever had an open conversation to this point that hasn't been highly censored. Like it's very clear that the roots of both things like Google and Facebook have their roots with intelligentsia as part of it. So like for me, Nostr really represents the first time that there can be a global and open conversation. And I don't think people are going to get onto that platform until they get on Instagram and they say the things they can't say and they get banned, and same thing with Twitter and otherwise. I like Elon a lot. I think that he is a champion in a lot of ways, but I think even with that being said, he's definitely compromised on a number of ways. And frankly, also like, I think X is just a general hate algorithm that's designed to make you depressed and angry. So like,
it's not as bad as Blue Sky though.
Oh, well, Blue Sky is just a brainwashing operation.
It's way worse. It's so toxic.
Well, and it's really interesting, like living in the Bay.
I went on there. I was like, oh, I thought you guys were supposed to be the good guys.
Well, it's funny, like living in the Bay Area, I questioned this for a long time. And now that I've been talking to a lot more people, like people are deeply brainwashed. And the really nice thing is that like, they can't withstand any logical argument in any meaningful way. And so the moment that you ask them 2 or 3 recursive questions, like they immediately collapse. And so like most people haven't thought about the fact that like, around women's rights stuff, I try to point out to them, it's like, look, like some of what you're saying is true, but don't you think the way that you've disenfranchised young white males might have a particular problem? And I swear to God, they're like, I've never thought about that before. It's like, don't you actually think that this class of people might have some importance? And they're like, huh. It's like same thing. Like, don't you think that
like winning wars?
Well, and even more importantly is that like, don't you see how you're actually encouraging a really hateful dialogue that's isolating a particular class of people who like you're now creating anonymity through instead of you welcoming them into the fold and saying, hey, this is about all people and you're important too.
Yeah.
But they really haven't thought about that. And furthermore, like their viewpoints are extremely weak.
Yeah.
They believe in these things because they feel good.
Yeah.
And like, I empathize. Like, it's important to care about all people. Like, I want to feed everybody in the world too. Nobody should ever go hungry. That's true. Is it economically viable with the current worldview that we have? No. And so like hard choices have to be made. And how do we do that?
Yeah.
And so like I found the place that, particularly in the Bay Area where we have a highly liberal population, the place that people are most receptive of is I go, look, Bitcoin is about everyone. Like, it's not about black, it's not about white, it's not about women, it's not about children, it's about all people. And there's a reason that I can use my money, that I can send it to Palestinian dissidents or individuals in South Africa who don't have access to a bank account. When you advocate for the other bullshit that you do that's outside of Bitcoin, I know that you're full of shit because you can't do that with your whatever your fundraising mechanism is or whatever political party you believe in. So like, give Bitcoin a chance because this is truly the thing of solidarity that all people everywhere can use to create a better life for themselves. And I think Bitcoiners need to essentially be the origin of a new, essentially, Orange Party, because it's only by us taking responsibility that we're going to address this. And the thing that I'm starting to come to terms with that I really don't like is like, if we don't do this, we're fucked. Like, that things are going to get really fucking bad. And it's explicitly because we didn't take responsibility to do something that, it is highly risky. It is probably going to mean that some of us get murdered. And it is probably going to mean that we create a very real political target for people who are early members that participate in something like this. Yeah. But it's also what we have to do if we want to make sure that the idea of America is successful. And also so that we don't get a Chinese-style totalitarian global government. So I think that that's really important that people need to think about. And whoever wants to take charge on that, please fucking do. Like, I don't want to be responsible for this.
When you're ready to go, I'll be there to support.
Yeah. So please, somebody else do it. I don't want to have to be the one to do it. So plus, nobody wants me as a leader. I'm not so good at it.
Bitcoin, it's the last hope we have. I hope we deserve it. Erik, thank you so much for being here. Let's take a break so that you're fresh for the event downstairs. And thanks again for being here. You got to sign our wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome.